thing. When I first watched Catherine's video, I didn't know what was going to be said in it.
Felt like the world sort of stood still for a minute.
I was actually quite emotional watching this video.
I think that Kate's story got so big, it resonated hugely, unequivocally.
There was a real vulnerability from her at that moment we hadn't seen before.
Welcome to Royal Exclusive Rewind, where we relive the highlights and lowlights of royal family history. 2 years ago, in March 2024, Catherine, Princess of Wales, released a video statement announcing she was undergoing treatment for cancer following abdominal surgery. The video came after an operation in January, which was followed by weeks of intense speculation, a social media frenzy about her health, and even an apology from Catherine regarding an edited photo she posted for Mother's Day. Joining me to discuss the videos released 2 years ago are royal reporter news.com.au Bronte Coy and royal correspondent for Newsweek Jack Royston. Welcome to you both. Now, look, a personal thing, when I first watched Catherine's video, I didn't know what was going to be said in it. So we were given advance notice and we all sat round in the office, in a closed office, and we watched her tell the world that she had cancer. The reason, I was quite emotional, to be honest. Believe it or not, Bronte, I was actually quite emotional watching this video because what had happened beforehand, she'd been gone to hospital, I think, for 14 nights, and then she'd disappeared. She'd announced that she had abdominal surgery. Then there was this social media frenzy, a bunch of videos that I think we had a video of her at the farm shop, all this, where's Kate, all these horrible, horrible rumours about her. The video itself, when it dropped, what did you make of it when you first saw it, guys?
It was exactly as you said, emotional. And this sounds really dramatic, but it honestly felt like after the frenzy of the weeks leading up to it, where really the cut through on the Where's Kate hashtag, you were seeing celebrities like Kim Kardashian, Blake Lively, joking about it for their own Instagram campaigns, not knowing, of course, the truth behind what was happening. But it had this cut through where people were talking about this everywhere. And so there was a frenzy, and all of a sudden this video arrived. And it was simplistic in its nature. It was her speaking directly to everyone and saying what had been going on. And you were seeing a woman who had clearly been scared, was dealing with something enormous, and was being very honest about her private health battle. And it was just deeply emotional. And it felt like the world sort of stood still for a minute, well, for the 2 minutes that it went when you were watching it. And it was incredible too, because we've never heard a senior royal speak like that before. It was a very moving speech by her.
Well, she took control because it was horrible. Well, genuinely, I think it was one of the worst situations I've seen reporting on the royal family for years, how nasty it was online, where people suddenly turned on her. And all that time, and all these horrible things you say, Stephen Colbert made jokes about, Kim Kardashian tweeted about her and stuff like that. There was just a really horrible piling on her. And was she forced, maybe, to make that cancer statement
100%.
Against her will? 100%
she was forced to make that statement. They'd lost control. You mentioned Stephen Colbert, who I actually think is the most significant one, because he put in, it was, in a jokey fashion on his chat show, which is a comedy show, he put into the mainstream media a long-standing conspiracy about William and Kate, a conspiracy theory that had been doing the rounds for years, and he took it mainstream. And that was the moment when it was really clear to me that Kensington Palace had fully lost control of the narrative. And so Kate had to do this in order to take it back. But she also had to endure weeks and weeks of this treatment, really, dark and sinister conspiracy theories that, she'd passed away on social media, partly because she wanted to get to the school holidays where she could tell her kids that she had cancer in a context where they would be able to just spend some time with her. Without having to go and face their fellow school pupils the next day.
It felt very much like social media, the darkest corners of social media had transformed, had made its way into mainstream media in the lead up to that video, which, as you say, had never really happened before with the palace, and they just had completely lost control of it.
We've had similar situations before. If you think back to, Princess Diana, look, she was chased. Paparazzi, people, and some of the stories about her were pretty terrible, and the behaviour. But then photographers and newspapers changed after the death of Princess Diana. I think that a lot of newspapers changed after Meghan claimed that, people have been racist against her in certain columnist pieces. Do you think this is the time for, after what happened with Catherine, for people on social media to look hard at themselves and actually change in the way that they react to public figures?
It's not often that social media stops and takes a minute and calms down the frenzy or takes any sort of self-reflection, especially the darkest corners of it. But I do think that generally speaking, because this had really become a mainstream conversation online, I think that there was a sense of shame when this video came out, and as you said, she had mentioned that the reason she'd held off making any announcement, not that she owed anyone any announcement about her health, but the reason she had was to allow the children to be away from school. I think there was that collective moment of just big step back, big deep breath. There's a sense of shame. I think there was a change in the tone, and particularly we've seen in the 2 years since. There's a lot of sympathy and a lot of grace given to her as she went through the rest of that journey with her chemotherapy.
I think that as far as celebrities go, I think the celebrity world really stopped and took notice, and people did think, wow, actually, I should have thought that through a little bit more. My slight concern is that social media, obviously, has created this whole new type of celebrity, which is just a major, big follower count social media profile. And one of the major moments in Kate's journey through this ordeal was when she drifted onto the radar of US-based conspiracy accounts. And working for a US newspaper or US magazine, I still see those accounts. And they're not posting about Kate anymore, but they are still posting just the same toxic nonsense, just about other people and other situations. So my slight fear, which I think that the palace may need to just, keep an eye on, is whether this could happen to them again. And I kind of think it could, because it's not just about your Kardashians and your Colberts. It is also about those people who kind of read as nobodies, except for the fact that they have massive follower counts and they're completely unaccountable.
But it is safe to say that, we watched that video and, all our emotions went out to Catherine. How do you think that she's kind of moved on from that video? Because she did another one later in the year, but we won't talk about that right now. But she really did kind of push herself out there. She really did she had, very little makeup on. It was a very simple sitting on a bench. What do you think it meant a lot for her to be able to do that as part of her recovery, to tell the world? Because we all kind of united around her, didn't we?
Definitely. There was a level of protectiveness around her from then onwards, but I think we saw from her at that time a real vulnerability in the simplicity of how it was delivered. And as you say, she was looking very natural. And I think when we spoke to Russell Myers recently on the show, in his book, he talks about how she wrote that herself. That was all her words. She wanted to deliver that message. And I think there was a real vulnerability from her at that moment we hadn't seen before. But in the time since, I think that's then helped her build her confidence. She's spoken out, as you say, about her health since. And I think it's a marked departure from what we've seen, not just from her, but from other senior royals in the past. And it's been, and I do think that there was a level of, as I say, protectiveness, and people really rallied around her, which would have buoyed her on further.
And now the King was also diagnosed with cancer shortly before, or announced his. He did it slightly differently, but he also didn't. He didn't go into so much depth. I mean, which one do you think resonated most with the public?
I think that Kate's story got so big that it, in some ways, it resonated hugely, unequivocally. I think the King probably took the slightly better approach, which is just to get it out there nice and early and be as open and frank as possible. And I understand Kate's reasons for not wanting to do that, but obviously also she did wind up in this very difficult situation as a result of that. So I think Charles probably did do it slightly better. But both will have this really enduring impact on the way that people who have cancer feel about their treatment. I think they both did a fantastic job trying to remove some of that stigma around having cancer.
But it's also about privacy. I mean, we talk about, everyone has the right to medical privacy. Did it put them in a difficult situation?
Absolutely.
Catherine and the King.
Absolutely. It's the reigning monarch. I can see on one hand, there has to be a level of transparency, but then I think that medical and health issues, particularly ones like this, they're enormous. They as a human being they have a right to privacy, but it was such a complex area they both landed in. And as you say, they took different tracks on how they did handle that. And I think because cancer is such a personal journey, they both did it in the way that suited them. Of course, Kate wanted to have that bubble around her and her kids when she did deliver the news, and protect them from that in the weeks afterwards. And the King got ahead of the curve in a different way. But I think that it was a really uncharted waters with them, because we're talking about two senior royals, the King and the Princess of Wales, both having this horrible illness and having to decide how to deal with it in real time as they discover their diagnosis, and the world is watching on. So it was very, look, you wouldn't envy any of the members of the family. And as William spoke about later, he said it was the most brutal year of his life.
Just quickly before we wrap up, I described to you where I was. We were sat in the office and we had a preview so we could prepare to put it online in the paper. Where were you guys when you had the same situation, or where were you?
I would have been watching it from home, I think. Honestly, I struggle to remember, but I think I would have been watching it from home. I remember that there had been, maybe like a week or so earlier, there'd been some stories in the papers, briefings coming out of the palace, along the lines that those who were making Kate's life hell were going to face a reckoning day. So I wasn't in some ways completely surprised, but I seem to recall it was one of these late Friday afternoon, evening kind of bombshells. So I would not have been anticipating working. I would probably have wanted to, probably be in the pub having a pint, which is what I tend to often do on a Friday afternoon. And then, yeah.
It was my very first week of working in London after moving here from Australia. It was my wedding anniversary. It was 6 p.m. and I was about to go out to dinner. Not saying that that's an important thing, but obviously this happened. And as I said, the world stopped. The world stopped. Of course, from there we were covering it, but it was an enormous moment. And my first week on the job here, and it was about as big as it gets.
It was as big as it gets, and it's worth saying that, she has spoken since and said that, the cancer, well, I think she's actually said that that it's in remission. And she's looking wonderful at the moment. We see her out on a lot of engagements, and she seems to be doing great. And let's hope we don't have to have any more videos like that again.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. Right, that's all we have time for on this week's Royal Exclusive Rewind. Thanks to my guests, and thanks to you for watching. Do join me next time for some more royal nostalgia when we go back into royal history to uncover another iconic moment.